Hi, my name's Kylie. I'm going to show you guys the different parts of the skull today. These are going to be all my terms that I'm using. And my computer is clear. Get back to the start. Alright. So first we're going to start off with the frontal bone. The frontal bone is this front bone right here. Next we're going to look at the parietal, and that's going to be these bones right here, as well as this one on this side. Next we're going to look at the temporal bone, and that's going to be this bone right here. Next we're going to look at the occipital bone, and that's going to be this bone on the back right here, this part. Next we're going to look at the sutures. So the first suture is going to be the coroneal suture, and that's going to be this one right here, this line. Next is going to be the sagittal suture, and that's going to be this line that separates left to right. The squamous suture is going to be this one right here, separates the temporal bone. And the lambdoid suture is going to be this one back here that separates the occipital bone. Next we're going to look at the nasal bone. So that's going to be this bone right here. Next we have the maxilla bone, and that's going to be all this right here, around here. Next we're going to look at the mandible bone, or the jawbone. Oops, sorry, 1 second. Okay. So this is the mandible bone. The mental foramen is going to be this hole right here. The mandibular ramus is going to be right here on the side. The mandibular notch is going to be right here. And the mandibular condyle is going to be this part up here. The coronoid process of the mandible is going to be right here. And next we're going to look at the zygomatic bone. That is going to be this bone right here, as well as right here. Next is the schnoid bone from the lateral view. Excuse me. So that's going to be right here. The ethmoid bone is going to be inside the eye and here, right around here. Sorry, it's hard to see. But it's going to be behind the lacrimal bone. The lacrimal bone is going to be right here. And the nasolacrimal bone is going to be this little duct right here. This little hole on the front. Really hard to see. Right in here. So the supraorbital foramen is going to be this hole right here above the eye socket. And the infraorbital foramen is going to be this hole below the eye socket. The superior orbital fissure is going to be inside the eye. It's going to be that hole at the top right there. While the inferior orbital fissure is going to be this lower part of that hole right there. So the vomer bone is going to be this bone right here in the middle of the nose. But also, if you turn the skull upside down, like so, sorry, it is going to be that middle part as well. Next, we have the perpendicular plate of ethmoid bone, and that's going to be this line right in the middle of the nose, right here. So the middle and inferior concha. So the middle concha is going to be, you can't really see it, but it would be a tiny bone in the top, while the inferior concha would be at the bottom. Tiny bone at the bottom, and it's on both sides. The interior nasal spine is going to be the point of the nose right here, just tip. Next we have the external auditory meatus, and that is going to be this hole on the side right here, so where your ears would be. Next we're going to look at the glabella, which is going to be this part right here above the nasal bone. Next we have, I'm going to open this skull up and look at the greater and lesser wing of the sphenoid bone. So the greater wings are going to be these parts right here, and the lesser wing is going to be this part up here. So greater, lesser. Next we're going to look at the optic canal, or the optic foramen, and that's going to be these tiny holes up here. Next we're going to look at the foramen rotunum, and that's going to be a hole, very tiny hole. It's going to be a very tiny hole at the top back here, right beside the saddle. The next one is going to be the foramen ovale, and that's going to be the hole underneath it. It's an oval shape. And next is going to be the foramen lacerum, and that's going to be right here, not to be mistaken by the carotid canal. There's a hole right here. Next is the foramen spinosum, and that's going to be the hole underneath the ovale hole, right in there. Next we have the carotid canal, which is going to be these little canals right here. The jugular foramen is going to be this big hole down here underneath the internal auditory meatus. Next we have the palatine bone, and that is going to be right where that nail is. The incisive fossa is going to be the hole at the roof of the mouth up here. And the greater palatine foramen is going to be a hole at the bottom on the palatine bone, diagonal from the greater palatine foramen, or the incisive fossa, excuse me. So the foramen magnum is going to be this big hole right here. Next, we're going to look at the mastoid process, and that is going to be these outer notches right here on the side of the skull. The styloid process is going to be this notch right here in front on the side of the skull. The stylomastoid foramen is going to be this hole right here beside the styloid process, right here. Next we have the crista galli, and that is going to be this middle section right here above the saddle. The cribriform plate is going to be this area around the crista galli. And the sella turcica is going to be the saddle, what I've been calling the saddle, that is the saddle. So this indented part of the skull right here. And last but not least, the internal auditory meatus is going to be this hole right here that I've marked because it was hard to see. And that's going to lead from the external auditory meatus. Thank you guys for watching.